Some American politicians and scholars say a second civil war is coming to a nation divided. I'm going to share with you an article about exactly why some people think that could happen. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. More at nomadcapitalist.com. The article from The Guardian, which I'm going to read with you in a moment, is called, "Is the U.S. Really Heading for a Second Civil War?" Now, spoiler alert, because we are not the doom and gloom channel, some of the people who commented said, no, the U.S. is not headed for a second civil war, but I'm going to share with you what some people say, why that could happen. But first, the last paragraph stood out to me for everything we talk about here at Nomad Capitalist, where it says, "And yet the assumption that it can't happen here," in quotes, "is as old as politics itself. It can't happen here." Old hat. Walter, who's referenced in the article, has interviewed many survivors about the lead up to civil wars. What everybody said, whether they were in Baghdad, in Sarajevo, in Kiev, was we didn't see it coming, she recalled. In fact, we weren't willing to accept that anything was wrong until we heard machine gun fire in the hillside, and by that time, it was too late. I have heard stories, as I have watched and listened to some U.S. media in recent months, from people who say, yeah, I talked to the guy from Bosnia, from Ukraine, from wherever, and they said, you know, you really, in the average person in the population, didn't expect anything was going to happen until it was too late. They felt things happening. But certainly in a country like the United States, this is what a lot of the commentators have said, is you have a lot of people with weapons. You have these great divisions. I was just talking to a friend of mine in the U.S. Earlier today who said, you know, people really feel at each other's throats. There's the, I do this, you do that, you're an idiot. And people over here, yeah, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. This is really, he said, unlike anything he's ever seen. And he says it's less pleasant to go anywhere. It's less pleasant to talk to people. And so is the U.S. Heading for a second civil war? That's the question that The Guardian posed. With the country polarized and Republicans embracing authoritarianism, that's the words of The Guardian. Some experts fear a Northern Ireland-style insurgency, but others say armed conflict remains improbable. And it talks a lot about the different perspectives on January 6th. Talks about how Joe Biden won bipartisanship, but has crashed into radicalized Republican opposition. This is The Guardian, after all. The Guardian and Nomad Capitalist probably don't agree on a lot of things. One thing that Nomad Capitalist is not about is taking political sides one way or the other, because quite frankly, my perspective is you want to be out, or at least have a plan B to get out before this happens, and be aware that it's going to happen. It's going to creep up on you. One of the things that the article says is, one was the emergence of a government that is neither fully democratic nor fully autocratic, an anocracy, as they say. And we've seen in reports most European countries are labeled as full democracies. The U.S., alongside countries like the Philippines, has been labeled a flawed democracy. The other is a landscape devolving into identity politics, where parties no longer organize around ideology or specific policies, but along racial, ethnic, and religious lines. We've seen that happen more. Now, not even the gloomiest pessimist is predicting a rerun of the 1860s Civil War with a blue army and a red army fighting pitched battles. It would look more like Northern Ireland and what Britain experienced, where it's more of an insurgency. It would probably be more decentralized than Northern Ireland because we have such a large country and there's so many militias all across the country, and that's true. They would turn to unconventional tactics, in particular terrorism, maybe even a little bit of guerrilla warfare, where they would target federal buildings, synagogues, places with large crowds. The strategy would be one of intimidation and to scare the American public into believing that the federal government isn't capable of taking care of them. Well, we don't need to prove that. We've proven the U.S. government, when it comes time, isn't capable of taking care of you, whether you live overseas and then to flight back during the pandemic, whether anything that's happening. I think we've already proven that on a grand scale, the federal government isn't going to take care of you. They might be good at sending you a check with money they just conjured out of thin air, but in terms of actually taking care of you, are they that good at that? No. It talks about a 2020 plot to kidnap the Democratic governor of Michigan. Could be a sign of things to come. This Walter suggests that the opposition figures, moderate Republicans and judges deemed unsympathetic, might all become potential assassination targets. Now, when I read this really makes my skin crawl in the sense of, is this something that you want to be a part of? Now, you may not believe it's going to happen, but I really like the last paragraph in this article that says, you won't know what's happening until it's happening. I've said for a long time, don't stay and fight. Go to a place, listen, if you believe that you want to vote along the, racial, ethnic, or religious lines, go to a place that satisfies that. I'm certainly not going to talk about where you can do that, but go where you're treated best. And my point is, there are continuing articles. This is a pretty mainstream source. I don't agree with all of the things, but The Guardian is pretty mainstream, saying, will there be a second civil war? They're talking about guerrilla warfare. They're talking about kidnapping. They're talking about all kinds of stuff that, for me, just saying it sounds weird. I mean, but yet you've been living through it in the U.S. where, yes, there was a 2020 plot to kidnap the Democratic governor of Michigan. Yes, there have been a lot of things going on in the United States that people seem to brush off because, hey, it couldn't happen here. This is just kind of harmless fun. And yet you see articles in The Guardian talking about all kinds of outrageous things. I wouldn't want to be involved in that. I want to live a peaceful life. I want to be left alone. I don't want to be stirring up trouble anywhere. And the idea that if you were to stay in the United States in this kind of scenario, and you are going to have to take some kind of side. One of the things mentioned, this is a long article, you can find it in The Guardian, but one of the things mentioned when Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a U.S. representative, suggested that a national divorce was necessary, other people in Congress responded in saying, listen, you're either a traitor or not. And so people are going to have to make decisions. It is heading towards that. It may not be an outright civil war, but it is already a country, the United States, where you've got to decide. You have people in your neighborhood who think you are traitors for believing one way or the other. Now, if you're going to be called a traitor, you might as well go overseas, not have to deal with this nasty business, not have to deal with the nasty people in your neighborhood, not have to pay huge taxes, go and have a better life somewhere else and find the opportunities in another country. If you're going to be called a traitor, we're already there, but I think it's only going to potentially get worse, where you have literally people in Congress saying, hey, are you with the country or not? Is there a case for a national divorce or not? The article talks about how militias, in conjunction with law enforcement in certain areas, could carve out little ethno-states in areas where it's possible because of the way power is divided. It would not look like the 1860s, but it would be pretty crazy. And so, again, I don't necessarily agree with all the points of the article by The Guardian and the fact that they're kind of going after one particular group. I say a pox on the houses of many in the United States who are fomenting this culture where it's just becoming increasingly unpleasant to live. People are calling me and saying, I don't recognize my country anymore. I never thought I'd want to move overseas. But the people who are calling us now are the ones who are going to be prepared before the proverbial shooting in the hillside that happened in the Sarajevos of the world. And so I think this is worth looking at. I had an old business partner who would say, whomever in the company you continually are talking about, that's a person who probably shouldn't be in your company. And we have shared articles in recent months in the last year about things like civil war, national divorce. I don't see these articles coming from many other countries. The fact that it's continually being discussed speaks to something that, even if you don't have a full-out civil war, and again, most people that they interviewed for this article don't think it's going to be something to the extent that it was in the 1860s, but why is it that it keeps coming up? It keeps coming up because a lot of people feel displaced in the U.S. For many different reasons. And I'm not here to judge whose reasons are good and whose reasons are bad. I'll leave that to The Guardian. But don't you think it's at least a good idea to have some kind of a plan for where to go? You might think, I'm going to stay and I'm going to be a patriot and I'm going to go down with a ship. I mean, again, the stuff they're talking about here, pretty nasty stuff. I don't know that I want to be involved in some of these violent things they're talking about, which is what naturally would come if you had a full-blown civil war. But don't you want to protect your fortune? Don't you want to protect your person? Don't you want to protect your family? You're not going to be labeled a patriot by many people, especially if you're the one looking to leave. I talked to someone recently who said, I can't wait until Texas secedes. It's not going to be as peaceful as you think. And you're not going to necessarily be the good guy to most people. We all want to think that we're the good guy, but when it comes to this stuff, I think that you're going to only see more of what's already happening in the United States, where people are at each other's throats. And in a sense, this need for a national divorce, as one representative called it, has already begun, with a sense that you don't have a united country. And the article talks about how, Joe Biden's trying to bring people together and be bipartisan, and then he realized that's not going to work. We're not big fans of Joe Biden here. But the idea that people just, don't want to come together, to me, is all the more reason to have a plan B, because, as the article says, the idea that it can't happen here is as old as politics itself. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.